Chicago. Ask someone to picture the city, and they will have trouble coming up with a concise description. When people think of New York City, they think of skyscrapers, subways, and muggers. When they think of Los Angeles, they think of sun, smog, and traffic. When they think of Detroit, they think of cars, factories, and decay. But for those of us that know, there's only one thing we think of when someone mentions Chicago: vampires. And tonight, we tell their story. Good evening, everybody. As always, it's your boy Twitch. Tonight, we're doing something a little different. You see, this is going to be the first time, well, in a while, that we've been able to get together to talk, where we're not going to be distracted by individuals that we wish to discuss and talk about. So, while they're busy, why don't we get some information and talk about how things have gone? It's been an interesting few months, to be honest here. Not quite sure, where to start, but I guess the best place to start is with the dreams that this batch of kindred had. You see, kindred are prone to, being old, and we forget things, many things. Sometimes we have dreams that involve retreating into our own memories, you see. And this coterie, minus their newest member, Sam, all had these dreams, as we call them, memoriam, all at the same time. Now, each one's subject was different, but each one, it was an important part of their kindred existence. Very interesting that they did this, you see, because we had Jackie, who remembered the night that she became an informant for Justicar. Shrek at the point. Shrek, yeah. Interesting. And we had Eleanor, who remembered a fateful night in Louisiana. Destiny, who remembered the night of her embrace. We had Roscoe, who remembered a night that the Chantry was attacked by Lamar. Lamar remembers the night that he set up the hit to kill Destiny's sire. It was an interesting beginning, but the oddest part is all three of them, or all 3 days they were in this memoriam at the same time. And even odder, Destiny is not old enough to have had memoriams. You see, that's normally something that we only get when we get older. And then right after this nap, we'll call it, Lamar finds out that the wife that he had left when he'd become one of us, one of the undead, she dies. And he decides to bring Zhao, who is known to enjoy talking to the dead. And he brings Zhao to go and find out if everything is fine after she dies. Which is rather interesting, because Zhao confirmed that Lamar's wife actually crossed the shroud and is now one of the undead, the true undead. She is one of the restless dead, as they are called sometimes. I wonder, will they run into each other? For those that have followed me from town to town, you know that I sometimes can peek into that realm. And let me just say that she is not happy at what she found out when she died. The fact that Lamar hadn't died or run away. Lamar was still on the earth. So many decades that they could have spent together lost because he chose unlife. It was that same night that Lamar had a run-in with the lupine. And he found out that the lupine are not all behind the war. There's some who understand that they haven't even recovered from the last war in Chicago. And you see, that's an interesting concept, because most people assume the lupine are bloodthirsty monsters, but they're not. They have emotions. They have thoughts. They can be strategic. And a war right now, for some of them, they don't think they could win. Or at least if they won, there wouldn't be enough left for it to matter. Well, as far as I know, the war's still on. Let's talk about Eleanor for a minute here, because this was also right about the same time that Eleanor had a vision. And I know you're shocked. Eleanor has a vision. I know. Surprising. But she has a vision of Lamar wrapped in chains with hooks on the end, digging into his skin, pulling. And a shrouded dark beast attached with it. Now, this particular vision is going to come up later in our discussion tonight, I think. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but that vision is going to be brought back up. Because, well, her visions normally ring true, but not always the way she thought. Because at the time, she thought it had to do with guilt, duty of what was happening then. And then Mr. Roscoe. Let's talk again about Roscoe, because Mr. Roscoe, curiosity always gets the best of him. And one night when returning to his bookstore, there was a visitor outside. A visitor that actually asked him, "Are you inviting me in?" Very plainly. And of course, Roscoe being Roscoe, friendly little chap, I say. He said, "Of course I am. As I've warned people before, be careful who you invite into your home. It's not always a good thing to have visitors." And in this case, the visitor came in. I believe it was a mild threat. It wasn't a major threat. But then took the amulet that had been given to Eleanor, that they had enclosed in mercury to keep it from hopefully being used. Oh, it was an interesting night. This was also at the same time after the dreams. Jackie met with Abigail and asked if she had had a dream. And Abigail did not, of course, because the dreams seemed to be focused on the coterie. And then Jackie set Abigail on a task. There was an individual she wanted to know about. It's an individual that turns out to have worked for Horatio Ballard. Yeah. Ballard's an interesting individual. Corpulent is a good way to describe him, but he's a man of excesses and vices. And he's continued those even into his unlife. But we'll get back to him. Needless to say, though, Abigail does find information, and we'll talk about that shortly. And this was one thing that surprised me here that happened way back 3-4 months ago. It seems Jackie. I wonder, would she be bad if I called her Jackie? She says only her friends call her Jackie, but I feel like I'm a friend in some ways. Her and Dredd seem to have started to form a bond, a companionship of some type. I don't know what she would see in a gangrel like that. He's not exactly refined, but I've been told on many occasions that sometimes you want something a little less refined. Sometimes you want something a little rough around the edges. You need a wild one in your life. When you get as old as I am, everybody, you won't have that same feeling. Has anyone, I'm curious, have you read about Alice in Wonderland? Just a musing of mine about following a white rabbit. Because Alice got more than she bargained for by going down that particular rabbit hole. And in this particular case, Eleanor was told to also follow a white rabbit. And she went down a rabbit hole, along with the rest of her coterie. They found something in this rabbit hole that was worse than a Mad Hatter's tea party. It was when Jason's son Newberry, Malkavian Primogen, hung on a metal hook, meat hook, staked, armless, legless, left as a gift, almost like an altar or a presentation. And the coterie had a decision to make, but they left the decision up to Eleanor. You see, Son and Eleanor had a small bit of history where Son was always trying to do things to Eleanor, trying to invade her mind, trying to change things. And so Eleanor had a decision to make about whether to, well, let's call it what it is, diablerize Mr. Newberry, or just to kill him. Or I guess she could have unhooked him and earned his gratitude, though that monster I wouldn't have helped him. She chose to destroy him, and in that I don't blame her, as someone who has tasted the soul of fellow kindred before. It leaves an imprint on you, a memory, thought, a portion of themselves. Someone like Son. It's not somebody I would advise you ever to have in your head. You should understand about monsters. It was this night, after this occurred, that Etienne revealed he had more information than he should. He actually informed Jackie that Eleanor's sire, Dolly, is on the red list. Now, I'm going to describe the red list. The red list, for those who don't understand, is a very simple concept. It is a list of people that the Camarilla has decided should be destroyed at all cost. Period. The ones in charge of this are called the Alisters. They are individuals chosen for their tenacity and the ability to get things done. Some of them you'd be quite surprised. But in this case, Dolly had earned a place on the red list for exactly the event of that night, for their willingness to maim kindred, leave them as gifts for other people. And I know I've talked to you a few times. I've never really fully explained the rules of our type. One of our rules is we don't allow people to know we exist. And I know, me telling you, but don't worry, I can tell you anything I want. You won't be able to tell other people what we've talked about, because I make sure of that. But in this case, leaving somebody armless, legless, hooked, and staked. Let's just say the wrong people find that, and it would lead to discoveries that our kind wouldn't enjoy. So Dolly earned the wet red list, which puts Jackie in an odd position, because Jackie works for a Justicar and has a duty to report those on a wet red list if they're found. But she also is friends with Eleanor and feels obligated to her as well. So, what does she do? Well, that's an interesting question. And they have a talk about it at a later point. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. You see, I'm trying to do things sequentially because, in my opinion, the best way to understand the flow of the events is to know what came first. Or as some friend of mine once told me, there should be a start, there should be a middle, and there should be an end. And you don't want to get ahead of yourself. You want to make sure you handle it in the correct order. So let's see. Destiny wasn't with them the night they saw Sun left behind. But Destiny was there a few nights later when she came to her clinic, her drug clinic. Why would she have a drug clinic? I'm sure you're asking that. Because, as the coterie found out later, poor Destiny is an addict. High-functioning one. But she's gotten a taste of, let's just say, her food, she likes to have it grease-spiced. We'll put it that way. But waiting for her outside was a woman who identified herself as Patricia Dooley. Now, I've heard that name, Patricia Dooley. Anyone who keeps an eye on things, works with the homeless a lot, would know it. She's known to be quite charitable, philanthropist. She does a lot of charities. But what a lot of people don't understand is that's not her real name. Her real name is Anita Rainwright. She is actually the Anarchic Baron. Not by choice. If she had her way, she would not be one. She would be anything but. But you'll find the best leaders often are the ones who didn't want the job in the first place. They didn't get it for power. They didn't get it for prestige. They just happened to be the right person in the right place at the right time with a skill set that's needed. But I digress when it comes to her. It seems she was sent there, well, for two reasons. One, to pass a message to Jackie, to invite her to come see the Anarch Baron. And the other, oddly enough, which is kind of amusing, to pass a message from Genghis, which, when you think about it, an Anarch Baron passing a message from a Bruja rabble-rouser. The message was that he still wanted a date with Destiny there in Anarch territory. Now, our society does operate on favors. That's not one I would have done, but they went with it. Let's see, major events in that same time frame. It's such an interesting time. You see, Lamar was having an issue with one Killian Roche. Now, how can I describe Killian? Douchebag? Arrogant prick? Jumped up thug, I think, works best. Yes, we'll go jumped up thug. Killian Roche is a Ventru jumped up thug. Unfortunately, Jackie is not used to dealing with jumped up thugs, mafia enforcers, brutes. She made a bit of a mistake on the phone call, which she said could be interpreted in their world as a threat. And he took it as one. Of course, Jackie being Jackie, she don't care about threats. She takes it and rolls with it and uses it to her advantage. You see, she has decided at this point is when she comes up with her plan. Well, if Killian wants to be a prick, and Killian works for Capone. Who else has a link to Capone? Well, One-Eyed K. Or Prince Loden. Former prince? Did he ever actually abdicate his city. That's a technical thing that I guess kindred lawyers, and before you ask, yes, we have blood-sucking bloodsuckers. There are kindred lawyers. They would have to discuss whether he's prince or not still. But Capone is his child. And if you have a paranoid Ventru and you want to see them eliminate enemies for you, what you do is you convince them that they're the one you want eliminated betrayed them. And that is exactly their plan. You say they wish to pit Loden versus Capone because they know that no matter who wins, both sides will be weak to the point where anyone, say Lamar, could even roll up. And now I want to talk about a budding little romance we've been seeing this season. You see, Roscoe has been spending a hell of a lot of time with Sun Chi at a tea shop. But the real question is, was he spending time with Sun Chi or was he spending time with somebody else? You see, there is the question, because Sun Chi is a woman within a woman. That's the best way to describe it. She is herself. She is not possessed. But for those of our kind that are old enough and powerful enough, we have ways to take over others, even of our kind, to use them. And my dear Sun Chi is definitely a tool used by somebody. I feel bad for her in some ways. It wasn't her choice. But then again, so little is. It wasn't my choice to be what I am now. It wasn't your choice to be what you are. Food. But, again, still not fair what was done to her. You see, those two have been getting closer and closer. They shared a night talking about the demon, about Roscoe's run-in at his shop, getting to know each other. And then, of course, she left when her visitor decided to take control. And the coterie got together to discuss things. One of the things they started to do is they're trying to figure a plan to pull Nero out of the picture. You see, Nero is a bit of a monster, even by my terms. He's flat. He has no, how can I put this in a polite way? He has no emotions. They're all gone, left, destroyed. Taken by something else. Now, our kind don't generally deal with that. We are creatures of our beast. Something appears to have his beast chained. So their plan is to get him out of the way and to deal with Kathy. A plan which, as we will discuss later, what is the phrase I've been told? Tits up. Yes, tits up. Yep, that's what it is. And then Abigail met with Jackie and brought her some pictures of Lasky at Ballard Industries, confirming who Lasky works for. Then the coterie gathered to look at these pictures, because Sam has a history with Lasky. And all of this comes about because of a prostitute named Sandy. Prostitute that is Destiny's friend. Destiny killed her pimp just to give her a chance to get out from under him and to work for Jackie, who will take care of Sandy much better. But you see, Ballard poses an interesting question, because Ballard is well connected. And then Eleanor notices that Sandy's eyes and Sam's eyes, they seem to share a common relation. Mother, perhaps. I won't say perhaps. You see, Sandy is his dear sister, taken by Lasky as a way of revenge, you could say, or a way to spite Sam, or just, well, to be frank, a way to be a dick. Poor Sam doesn't take that well, because that is his sister he's been looking for decades, unable to find where she went. And it turns out she's been in Chicago the whole time, a city he was from, came back to, couldn't find anything, and left. You got to feel for Sam at times like this. You really do. And here's where things take a turn for bad. You see, the Sinshaw Island sovereign came to visit the coterie. And when he did, of course, Jackie had a plan to have Roscoe mention that Roche and when Gino Manatelli were associating together. Now, when one of our kind does some things that upset a prince or breaks our rules, one of the punishments is called a blood hunt. Basically, it means your life is forfeit. Your unlife. But the other rule that goes with it is any who harbor or provide safe passage or otherwise protect one with a blood hunt, well, you could also be subject to a blood hunt just for that fact. And in this case, the idea is that Roche is going to get punished for harboring Gino Manatelli, an individual that was declared on a blood hunt by no less than Karina Dobson, Prince of D.C. Now, Karina is a young kindred, but D.C. is important. Not as important as Chicago to the Camarilla, but still important. The hope, I think, is that Damien or Alexa will remove Roche from the picture. But you see, here's that problem. While Alan was there, he wished to speak with Eleanor, to ask her if he or if she had seen anything about the son, if he was missing. Had she heard him? Had she seen him? Well, turns out Eleanor is many things, but a liar she is not. She's not very good at preventing people from understanding when she lies. So in this case, let's just say the Sinshaw found out that Eleanor did know something. And it was here that Jackie got an idea, which, though brilliant, is horrifying at the same time. You see, her idea was rather simple. We could fix the problem by just having Eleanor's memory rewritten so that she wouldn't remember what had happened that night. She won't remember killing son, won't remember running into him. And it's a good idea, but it's horrifying because the only one that Eleanor knew that could do it, that could be trusted to do it, was Dolly. Now, I have lots of things I can say about Dolly. Lots and lots of things. And I think towards the end, we're going to have a discussion about them. Because there's things to say about that individual. But needless to say, Dolly is a bit extreme, fully capable of removing a memory. But Dolly has plans and a goal of their own. And when you remove a memory, the best way to hide it is to place a new memory over it. Now, I did not find out till later what memory Dolly put in Eleanor's head. But suffice it to say, it wasn't a good one, and it wasn't a good idea, though I think I understand why Dolly did it. Dolly is attempting to create a monster like them. Unfortunately, I think at this point, Eleanor has finally started to catch on to the monster their sire is. I almost feel bad for her. You build up this mental image, this ideal version of what you think your sire is. Now, yes, we are all monsters. We feed on your kind. We do horrible things. But you see, there are monsters, and then there are monsters. You may have an ideal vision. Take Jackie, for instance. She's seen her sire, Nolan Wilhelm, at his best. She's seen him now at his worst. And she harbors no illusions that he is not his best anymore. But that realization is painful. In Eleanor's case, the one that she reached to, protected her, guided her for so long, she has realized has been playing her the whole time. It's a giant monster. And in the end, it could be a problem. You know, we haven't talked about Lamar much lately. Let me bring up Mr. Lamar again. You see Lamar, interestingly enough, part of their plan to deal with Nero was to claim Lamar had broken up with Destiny, though those two were never dating. And then have Lamar and Kathy start dating. And then when Nero showed up, to have Jackie try to distract him away. And it would pull them apart and get Kathy to quit chasing Lamar while dealing with Nero, and also even had some elements to deal with Genghis. But you see, during this plan, Lamar calls to set up a date with Kathy, and unfortunately, Lamar, as smooth as he is not used to this kind of a rom-con, you may call it, romantic con game. You see, those who get into the romantic cons, they generally have a certain skill set. It's not considered for the novice. It's not considered for those who are unpracticed. Lamar was unpracticed. Both him and Kathy mentioned a word that should not be said. They said coterie over the phone. Now, you may wonder, well, what does that matter? You see, this whole Patriot Act thing and the government spying and the war on terror, some very short-term thinking, kindred decided to use it against their enemies. And your kind catch on rather quickly. And it turns out they kicked off a second inquisition against us. So using words like that over a phone that are not secure, well, you saw before, it caused the steakhouse to get attacked and raided. In this case, both of them saying coterie. I think more than a raid would happen with that one. It could be a bit of a problem. It comes up later, which we'll get to. Because I need to talk first about a meeting between Sam and Jackie. Sam being rather flippant, decided to joke around with Etienne. Etienne, I've met a number like him, the gentleman's gentleman, the perfect ghoul in some ways. He didn't take it well, so he replied in kind, which seems to have caused Sam to be a bit overly aggressive. And I will say, in the following bits that come out, one thing I think Sam learned is Etienne is more than just the doorman, Jackie's valet, Jackie's manservant, her driver. He's a bodyguard and a fighter first. I think Sam was quite surprised that Etienne was quick enough to avoid what was meant as a way to spur him on, to edge him on, just to vent a little frustration. Etienne was more than enough. But also, unfortunately, Jackie has been with Etienne a long time, and she caught the hostility. And Etienne got in a wee bit of trouble about their disagreement of etiquette, as he would put it. I think it was fine, and I would let it go, but it's not my goal. You'll see I don't have many of those. But there was I wouldn't call it an argument. Let's just say there was latent hostilities between Jackie and Sam this night. You see, because Sam realizes Sandy is his sister, but she's working for Jackie, who runs an escort service. And Sam would not listen when Jackie said this escort service is not prostitution. Because not all escort services are. Some of them are just for companionship, or honestly, most of it's status. Most of the time you have an executive come into town and they need somebody on their arm that's good looking, cultured, can attend events with them to make them look presentable or to give the image they wish to have. Now, there are, of course, escorts who are prostitutes, but in this case, Sandy wasn't. But Sam refused to learn that. And it caused some hostility between the two that I think we're going to last for a while. Because Sam likes to push. It's his clan bane. I think it's part of his... it's in his blood, you might say. Let me take a sip of my drink here. Wait, you expect it to be blood? No, you see, yes, our kind does drink blood. Certain thing gets substance, and many of us can't consume drinks. It takes an effort of will for me to do it. But when you're in a bar like this, you have to kind of give the appearance of being alive. Otherwise, people get suspicious. Why sit in a bar and not drink anything, you see? Feel free to drink yours, of course. Let's see, where to continue? We talked about Roscoe in his shop and getting an amulet taken. One of the things he was told about was a gift for a gift. It seems some supernatural individuals have a thing about gifts for gifts. Don't know why, but they do. And in this case, Roscoe was curious what was left behind. Was something left behind? Could something have been left behind? You see, they didn't know. So the way they did it is Eleanor came. Eleanor is very good at finding things. You might say that Eleanor can find a button anywhere because she'll push it. But she found a book, Dante's Inferno, left behind by the one who dropped in. I find something slightly amusing about it being Dante's Inferno. I don't know how to put it, but a demon leaving behind a Dante's Inferno copy. There's a poetic part of that, especially as Dante's Inferno is a bit of a dramatic comedy in some ways. But they realized it was left as a gift, and they decided to try to destroy it. They finally ended up settling for putting cold iron. I think you would call it wrought iron, black iron, pig iron sometimes. They put it on it. And in so doing, caused the book to sizzle, burn. And as we'll find out later, the book was linked in some ways to somebody else. But after this book was discovered there, it seems Sam and Roscoe decided to be a bit of pyromaniacs because they burnt Roscoe's shop to the ground. As a friend of mine once said, there's no problem you can't solve with a bit of white phosphorus, apparently. Well, it's after this that Roscoe once again met with Sun Chi to speak again, and they keep getting together and meeting, though they haven't met lately. I guess we'll talk about that part too. I want to bring up an incident that happened, though. One of the ways to deal with Sam's attitude towards Jackie was for Jackie asked Lamar to have a talk with him because those two had fought in wars before. There's a certain amount of respect that comes from being on opposite ends of a war, especially when you both managed to survive the war. So Jackie had asked Lamar to have a talk with Sam. And while they did, in the car, Lamar said some striking words about how, you need to back Jackie because she's doing a lot of good for the coterie. And he even pointed out that the fact that it's a Lasombra saying that should highlight that point. But it was the same night that Lasky made a move. And apparently he's got favors. Because he's a ghoul, he can't change people's memories. But he's got friends and he's got favors because he calls someone to try to T-bone Sam's car. Now, Sam loves his car. He really enjoys his baby, as he calls it. And let's just say, well, Sam was not happy, but thankfully his vehicle was not damaged. But it's this kind of activities that convinced Jackie that she needed to meet with Ballard not just to talk about the Sandy situation, but to also feel out about the Lasky problem, because it's a problem. And it's a problem that should be taken care of. Of course, Jackie doesn't want to go to war against Ballard, and I don't blame her. You don't want to go to war against Ballard. So, she decides to set a meeting. But before she can go to her meeting, Martin pays a visit. Now, for those who have talked with me before, Martin is actually Destiny's surrogate father. Well, I guess the truth, we've talked about it before. Martin is her actual sire. Very protective because, well, she's masquerading as a toreador. Crime that would not be forgiven. And he realizes that Jackie knows the secret, and he meets with her to have a talk, to discuss what Jackie intends to do. And the best I can come out of that meeting was, by the end of it, the discussion boiled down to he would have to decide whether to destroy Jackie or not. It doesn't appear he made a decision at the time. Well, yes. You wonder, yeah, when Martin meets most people over Destiny, it is threatening. Very much a threat. But you can understand why. If she is found out, it means not only the destruction of her, but destruction of him too. Clan Toreador would never forget that a Kaitif sired by a Nos has been claiming Toreador. And in case you don't understand what a Kaitif is one of the clanless, let's just say our rigid social structure we have for our society. Puts those that don't have the bonds of their fellow blood just one step above those whose blood is so thin that they're barely even one of us. I know you may think that's rude and that may be callous, but it's the way it works. We haven't talked much about Eleanor's friend Ben, but we need to talk about this man, Ben. You see, Ben is a thin blood, as I just talked about thin bloods, but he's a thin blood from a Malkavian line, which gives him a unique touch on things. He's not quite kindred, not quite human. It's a little bit of both. And Eleanor went to meet with him to find out how he was doing. And Ben admitted that he's been losing parts of his memory, gaps, things disappearing, time skips. And he remembered something about a bookshop. He also had a burn mark on his back and the symbol of wrought iron thumb screws that happened to look just like the ones that were placed on the book. It seems that Ben definitely was linked to the book somehow. And it was at this point that the emissary, a demon, supposedly, at least that's what they think, spoke through Ben and had a polite discussion in some ways with Eleanor and explained that he would have rather taken her or one like her, but he can't. You see, one thing most people don't realize about demons, they can't possess kindred. But also, you've got to remember, Ben is a thin blood. He's not quite kindred, not quite human. And it seems this demon, though it was difficult, and it took time, and had some problems integrating, was able to possess a thin blood. Because they had a talk about Eleanor needs to stay off the board of the game that's being played. Now, it's funny, if anyone ever tells you to stay off a board, to not interfere in a game being played, by telling you that, it tells you they're playing a game. So aren't you already on the board? Maybe not the board they intend, but you are on a board. As a friend of mine once told me, the moment you realize it's a game, you've already lost. Haven't thought of Sir Warren in years. Well, that was a long time ago. So we also found out that Sam had low-jacked Eleanor with her permission. When the coterie found out she was meeting with Ben, let's just say it was a dog pile to see how fast the coterie could show up to protect her. But the only one who goes in when they arrive was Jackie. And Ben told Eleanor that it was time to send a message to her friends to make sure they understood. And when Jackie comes in, she saw the shadows coalesce. And though Ben was still there, but not there, but there, this monster formed giant eyes of fire, hints of wings on the back, shadow cloaked. And you see, it's funny because I've dealt with their kind in the past. Normally when they take that form, their body is that form. But in this particular case, because apparently the assumption of control wasn't complete, they couldn't quite pull their demonic, angelic, well, that one was demonic for sure, their demonic form from their body. They just had to manifest a bit of their spirit. Though I suspect that is not a limitation they have long. It's this conversation where the demon actually reveals that they are a true demon. One of the fallen that followed the Morning Star's rebellion against God. Now, I've done some research on that subject, and even what I've found is vague. But I have a feeling the stories told in the Bible are not quite how it went down. Of course, then again, what stories written ever are. It always gets changed over time. Now we come to what I call club night. It seems there's always a night where people gather in the club and something bad happens, something odd happens. But in this case, Nolan came to see Jackie on the anniversary of her embrace. Bit of sentimentality. Sentimentality I think that he shouldn't have had, you see. It's a bad idea to be sentimental, especially when you're hunted. Because while there, Sierra Van Burris, Van Burris, interesting. She took a notice to Nolan and exited the club shortly after he did. It was noticed by both Nolan and Jackie. And it came to be a problem later. But as I said, beginning, a middle, and an end. That story picks up a bit more towards the end. We're still in the middle. We need to set up a few other parts of this middle. Let's see. Well, Alexa showed up that night. Zhao was there. Zhao didn't have much to say other than she threw off her pursuers, the lupine, that night. But Alexa did have some messages. She met with Roscoe and explained to Roscoe that the regent of the Tremere Chantry has been rather unreliable of late. And they wish that reliability to be improved. And in order to be improved, what they need is perhaps at some points Roscoe to track individuals for them using his abilities. And it's very odd because that's not the way it's normally done. You see, normally, if you wish to use a Tremere for something, you go to the regent and you ask him, and the regent will decide if it's an appropriate request. And if it is, he will assign one of the members of the Chantry to work with you. But in this case, they're bypassing him totally and getting assistance to track people. We'll have to see who they're tracking. Alexa also met with Sam that night and does what Alexa does, which is threaten people. But she also passed an odd message that Damien was curious about whether he could fight. and whether Damien could count on him in fights, which is a bit of a hint that possibly Damien has a job for him. This was a rather eventful night, though, because at the end of the night, as Destiny went to leave, she found out Martin was driving an Uber. And Martin revealed that he had finally gotten information on her friend growing up, Tiffany. Turns out Tiffany was embraced by one Gary Golden. Now, I've never personally met the Nosferatu in question. I've heard good things. I've heard bad things. But the fact she was alive and living in L.A. and that Martin had not only arranged to get the info, but to arrange a way for her out of the city, to give Destiny a chance to get away from things and to get away from Genghis and to get away from the events that happened with Delilah, and a chance to catch up. It's also in this discussion where Martin admitted to knowing a bit about demons. Now, Martin doesn't know as much as he thinks he does, but I guess you could say he has a passing amount of knowledge. Let's see, where did we go from there? Destiny and Jackie go to meet with the Anarchs, Anita Wainwright, where Anita explains that Sylvia was one of them, and there's a certain subset of Anarchs who are not pleased that Sylvia visited this particular coterie and then was gotten later. And while Anita doesn't believe that Jackie was part of it, I know the individual she's talking about, Duncan McTavish. I even believe a Joseph Kerr is one of them who may have questions about this particular coterie. And Jackie revealed that Alexa had done it and that the sire was Olivia Myers, who, oddly enough, Jackie had helped smuggle out of town, though she left that portion out of the discussion, which is smart. And we have, well, Destiny got to meet with Genghis, and it turns out he can be less of an overbearing douchebag when you have someone such as Mal Davis riding herd on him. Mal Davis is an interesting individual. She's related to the Tremere region. Great-granddaughter, great-great-grand, something like. She's related by blood, but also embraced. But she ended up clanless. But she's a clanless of great power. And for a while, she was moving against the Prince of Chicago with the assistance of Annabelle and the previous primogen of the Tremere of all things, Nikolai, who was the regent at the time, and a few others. But she got discovered and had to flee town. Almost got destroyed, though she doesn't know who saved her. But even Genghis doesn't push his luck with her because she's very strong-willed. He was on good behavior, though he did bring up with Destiny that she seemed more anarch than Camarilla. And if she's willing to come out, he will be on his best behavior and will stop embarrassing her when he's in Elysia, provided she just comes out and listens to him talk a bit about the Anarchs. You might say he was trying to recruit her, though he did not give any promises about Lamar, other than he won't fuck with Lamar when Lamar's in the prince's domain. Think about that loophole. Because it is a loophole. Very much a loophole. The loophole is, of course, when Lamar steps out of town, Genghis was going to whoop his ass. So, we'll see how that ends up. When they got back from this, the coterie were supposed to have a gathering, but Destiny was delayed. But another visitor was not. Another one of the homeless came, very formal homeless. Homeless, destitute. What did somebody call it? Housing challenged, I think one of them said. It's all the same. Well, in this case, no, it's not. This individual probably has more money than most people understand because he's actually just a messenger for the One-Eyed King, Prince Loden, that has fallen. They were summoned to meet with him that night. They had an hour to get there. Destiny was not there. But it's at this time they find out that one Charles Crook Dawson was watching their club. Now, Jackie knows about Mr. Crook. Crook, you see, has a problem. He has an addiction, and it's addiction to fire. When he gets bored, he likes to start fires. But he also gets upset if somebody else starts fires instead of him. So Jackie uses it as a chance to try to get him to find out who lit the fire in their domain. I don't think Crook quite understands. Crook thinks Jackie likes him. Crook thinks, if nothing else, his appearance is small and unthreatening is in some way working on Jackie. But I got bad news for Mr. Crook. It's not. She knows what he is. She sees through him. It's not going to end well for him in the end, I don't think. But they go to this meeting where they meet with the One-Eyed King, and true to plan, they inform him that Capone is alive. Capone betrayed him, and Capone is running the South Side. And though the One-Eyed King was somewhat coherent, somewhat able to think and talk at the start of their meeting, after this bit of knowledge, let's just say that ended quickly. He became rapidly, unstable. Which was the plan in some ways, I guess. Because he decided he was going, in his Shakespeare quotes, to take out Capone, to punish his children for betraying him. His army of kindred and homeless and ghouls are going to descend on the South Side. Grab a drink. I know I'm doing all the talking, but please make sure you drink. I think your kind need to be hydrated, because when you're not, the blood gets thick. It's not as tasty. Oh, don't worry if I decided to drink from you. I'd make sure you don't remember. So where to go from here? Well, they get back from this meeting. And Destiny is there. And this is where a big bombshell is dropped. Because Destiny lets the coterie know that she's going to be departing Chicago. Martin has arranged it. And she's going to be heading out to L.A. to see Gary Golden and to meet with her friend Tiffany that she has not seen in a long time. Sad to see her go. It was sad the way the coterie reacted. But they understood. And they actually hatched a plan to have Genghis go with her. Now, this is funny considering it went from Destiny hates Genghis, can't stand to be around him, doesn't want him near her, to, well, he's not as bad a guy, and maybe I'll take him with me. Because she did. As the coterie found out later, her and Genghis left for L.A. But she had one last meeting. You see, she met with Winnetka and told Winnetka about the South Side War. About how Loden and Capone will be fighting. And that the idea is that, well, Winnetka's going to roll in and take on the winner and destroy them all. Makes sense. And Winnetka agrees with the decision to take Genghis because Winnetka says use him. Use him as a tool. Have him protect her. And if she runs into any problems or gets in any trouble, pin it all on him. Blame it on the older, experienced Anarch corrupting this young, naive Toreador. And you would say, well, would that work in our society? Well, I'm afraid to tell you it does. Though we are kindred, we have mortal frailties. And the older we get, you'd be amazed how many of us assume the young ones don't know anything. They're not current. They're not able to keep track. They're not able to think on the same level. You would be surprised how often that little ploy works. And before Destiny could leave, though, Jackie left her a gift to give to Anita. A tarot card. The Lovers, if I recall correctly, with a Luke's business card and a note to tell her that if she wants to get even with Alexa for destroying Sylvia, to go for a Luke. Hurt the only one Alexa seems to care about. Actually, it's a good move, though there could be some extended repercussions that we haven't seen yet. When they finally spent the rest of the night after Destiny had left, Eleanor discussed what she had learned from the emissary that night. And one of the things she learned is that, of course, demons cannot take over an actual kindred. They can take over a thin blood, but not a kindred, which made Roscoe think Sun Chi could not be possessed by a demon because Sun Chi is kindred. So, if that is a problem, what is in Sun Chi? Now, see, I'll let everyone hear in on a little secret. I know exactly what's in her. But some secrets are not mine to share. But needless to say, it definitely is not a demon. Lamar, still moving on his plans for the South Side and to deal with some family issues, contacts his boy Tariq, which, though Tariq doesn't know it, is actually related to Lamar. You see, it's his great-grandson, which is interesting. But he wants him to steal a ledger. He's going to try to use it in some way, though I haven't figured out how to deal with the family squabble. Even I don't know everything. I'm sure I'll find out at some point. But the oddest part from it was what came out of it is it appears that Tariq's mother has been blackmailing, members of the church or something. Wonder what, I'm sure you can think of things that you could blackmail a church member with, but I wonder what she's getting out of it. I wonder what Lamar's going to do with that knowledge. That is the real question. It's always a question you have to ask. What to do with the knowledge you gain. Now, I mentioned Ballard and Jackie earlier. Remember, beginning, middle, end. We're definitely deep in the middle, almost towards the end of the events coming up. But Jackie meets with Ballard, works a deal that included, Ballard owing her a boon. Now, I'm not sure how Jackie could even sit in the same room with that corpulent pig stuffing food in his face. Told you earlier, we do sometimes at least act like we're eating food. But he actually does it because he's a man of vices and still wants to stuff his face with food. It's a waste. She met with him and they worked a deal. It turned out a bit advantageous to Jackie. But at the end of the deal, Ballard revealed that he knows about Lasky and Sam's little beef. A ghoul versus a kindred. Now you may say that wouldn't be fair. Can't the kindred just destroy the ghoul? Well, yes. But if you destroy a ghoul that is one of Ballard's, that starts a war with Ballard. Ballard is too well connected. You don't want to go to war against the prince's broodmate, the Sinchal sire. Let's just say it's bad for business or continued unexistence. But Ballard explained that if Sam will keep things low key, keep it low enough key that he can pretend not to notice, he won't get involved. And as long as Lasky keeps it low key enough that Ballard can pretend not to notice, it will stay that way. Now, he did ask Jackie to warn him if Lasky gets too out of hand, because it's bad for business, as I've said. But as long as the two of them can keep their hostilities at least somewhat veiled, at least somewhat hidden, to where it's not obvious that they're going against each other, Ballard was content to just let it happen, you see, because sometimes you have to spoil a ghoul that has earned, well, has at least shown they're competent. Competent ghouls are hard to get. You would be amazed the breakage rate of some of the ghouls out there. And it's at this same night that Jackie's meeting with Ballard, that Roscoe, Sam, and Lamar have the idea to go, let's find where Lasky goes. Let's find out some info about Lasky. And it seems luck that night was with Roscoe, who tends to be rather unlucky. He's very lucky that night. They managed not only to track Lasky, find where he went, but to get quite a bit of info. One of which was Lasky was at Blue Velvet. Now, Blue Velvet is run by a clanmate of mine. One that, well, I haven't really explained our clans, but let's just say ones that are known to be unstable, like I am, though each one is different. But it's run by one like that who, well, you've heard of gourmet food, of course, where Kobe beef, Wagyu beef, beluga caviar. Those are all different grades. Well, blood is the same way. You may not believe it. Some people have certain tastes, expensive tastes. And let's just say the one who runs Blue Velvet caters to that taste. And I know you may find that distasteful. And in some ways, I guess it is. I mean, from your point of view, it would seem like selling people to be eaten. But look at it from our point of view. What we are doing is the same as is done with a prize cow. A prized horse. Unfortunately, you are our food. And as food, there are times where we are less than compassionate and we do horrible things. And it seems Lasky's little business for Ballard of people import and export, well, trafficking. Let's just say it what it is. Trafficking. It seems he supplies the owner of the Blue Velvet. And thanks to their abilities and this lucky night Roscoe was having, they tracked him down where he spent time at Red Number 5, where he spent time at a Luke's Gallery. He spent quite a time hitting place to place. And the big thing to say about all these discoveries is Sam now realizes that if not for Lasky's hatred of Sam, if not for Lasky's desire to punish Sam or to otherwise feel he got one over the Sam or better than Sam, or just out of a sense of just being a dick to Sam, rather than trade his sister into one of these blood farms. He actually may have protected her in some ways, though protecting her and turning her into a prostitute, turning tricks on the street, I wouldn't exactly call something to be thankful for. But it did beat the alternative. She could have been destroyed. Sam is going to have to do something about Lasky at some point, I think. And we had talked earlier about Eleanor's sire, Dolly, being on the red list, and the Allisters. This is where Jackie starts to hint that Eleanor may need to make a decision about whether to turn her sire over to the Astor or the Allisters or not. It's a hard decision, but as I've said, we're all monsters, but some of us are worse than others. And we're going to be talking about Dolly shortly, you see, because, well, I did sire Dolly. I created Dolly. But Eleanor had a vision. It was a vision of a white horse being attacked by a hound with jeweled fangs. The fangs were red, blood red. And the hound fought against the steed, and the steed fell after a heroic effort. And in the end, all that was left was blood and ashes on a scepter. Now, as I've said, I haven't gone deep into details about our various bloodlines, clans we call them. But in this case, the scepter is, well, the blue bloods of us, the ones who fancy themselves the leaders, the nobles, bankers, gangsters, and thieves. Don't let them tell you otherwise. But it suggested that one would fall. And of course, the white horse, they debated a bit. But you see, they've all known of an individual that, well, actually was affectionately called the Hound. Patrick Fitzhenry, also known as Tally. Tally's a bit of a boogeyman for many of my kind. And the type of boogeyman he is, he earned a reputation to Hound. Though some would say it's because he's a lapdog, it's really because of his dogged determination. He will pursue a target. He will track the target. He will not let a target go until he accomplishes what must be done. You can try to evade him. You can try to escape him. But he's dogged in his pursuit. And in this case, it suggested, well, that was going to happen. But there was also debate about whether it also could have been related to a lupine attack they found out about. You see, turns out that same night, lupine attacked a biker gang. Now, Jackie was initially worried that it could have been the wolf pack. Turns out it wasn't. It was another gang called the Railroad Dogs, led by one Blooper. A very odd individual that's, well, at one point he was in the hands of the Second Inquisition, test subject of theirs, who managed to finally break free and now has a, well, I would say irrational hatred, but it's well-deserved hatred of the Second Inquisition. It just so happens, though, that night that the wolf pack was meeting the Railroad Dogs to talk about, Railroad Dogs are more anarch-independent aligned, but to line up their forces together to deal with the lupine threat, and the wolf pack showed up just in time to assist. And so the wolf pack survived pretty well. The Railroad Dogs exist still, at least didn't lose many. And of course, well, Jackie found out some new info, didn't she? Stuff she didn't know, especially with some of the Second Inquisition, you see, because we're about to come back to that as I discussed earlier. Sam goes and speaks with Damien about the potential job that I'd mentioned earlier. It turns out Damien is wishing to have more eyes and ears in the city because when you've been sheriff as long as Damien has, and there's noticeable, people tend to know who your eyes and ears are. Damien likes to recruit people that are newer to the city to pass him info. And in this case, Damien has come to realize he's got a hole in his info. He's been blinded in the south side because not only has Loden built up there, Capone came back and built up there. There's been a number of events in south side that Damien knew nothing about. And as sheriff, his job is to know about them. And he's worried that the only way somebody could blind him in the south side is somebody who knows who his contacts are, who his informants are. So he's wanting Sam to be his, well, undercover, his snitch. But to be one that not announced, not talked about. Which I guess is a good idea. And he hints that, he's not sure, but it's got to be somebody close to him. And while this is going on, once again, Roscoe meets with Sun Chi. And this time he makes a calculated mistake. Well, it was a risk to him. It's a mistake when you think about it. He called out to Sun Chi that she can't be demonically possessed because demons can't possess kindred. She wasn't happy about that because the one who controls her lashed out at him, damaged a chair, threatened him quite a bit, and said if he interfered with her business, she would destroy him. But if he was a good little boy, did what he was told, served, well, she referred to herself, brought up the garden and the plants and Eden. But if she served him, or served her, she might give a gift to Roscoe of Sun Chi for a time. Short time. Because even as this one said, that though males are useless for most things, and they've destroyed much, they do have a few things they're good for. It was a calculated risk that I'm not sure Roscoe thought all the way through. But then again, Roscoe rarely thinks everything through. He's more of a go on instinct kind of individual, which I guess played off this time because once again he walked out alive. And now we're going to a rather big problem. And it's a major event. See, I talked about a date earlier with Lamar and Kathy. And they go to have this date. And there's a problem on this date. You see, they had mentioned coterie over the phone at a previous point. And it was monitored. Certain individuals found out that word. And they come to take Kathy into custody while Lamar and her are on a date. And though Lamar's quick on his feet, he thinks of a good way to get out of the restaurant, which is nice because it prevents it from happening inside. They are met out back by agents, claimed to be agents at least, who tell him to get lost because apparently his somber curse that makes tech unreliable didn't allow them to catch on to him, but they sure as hell caught on to her. But you see, what they didn't realize, and I don't think Lamar realized either, is Kathy had a protector. Somebody watching over her that night. Once again, Nero. And Nero, well, he got his beast back for a while, it seems. Nero got to revel in destruction because these 10 agents they sent all perished. Nero picked them apart as if they were playthings. And all the pipes in the area exploded, causing water to flood, water mains breaking. And you say, well, what's the significance of that? You see, one thing this coterie learned early is there's a violence problem in Chicago right now. But it's linked to the water, which is linked to the lake spirit, which it's been suggested, oddly enough, that it's all riled up because of something the Tremere did in flooding the Undercity, which caused the water to be everywhere. But the exploding pipes suggest that, well, Nero is working for this lake spirit. And what was unleashed that night was, well, it's a masquerade breach. But it's less than one if there's no witnesses, isn't it? If you don't leave a witness, let's just say there's nobody to say what happened. But Lamar was a bit worried at that because he had been on a date and he was worried that they found out about him. We'll come back to that one shortly, but needless to say, he was in a bit of trouble. We keep coming back to this Ben character. Roscoe actually has a meet with him again. This Ben individual steps in front of Roscoe's car when he's driving. And Roscoe, being Roscoe, stops and invites him in the vehicle. Roscoe can't say no to people. Anyone who wants to go and see Roscoe and go to his bookstore, his haven, his car, anything, just ask him and he'll invite you in. You might even be able to get in his pants. He might invite you in if you just ask, because he's so inviting to everyone out there. But this talk with the demon was in a lot of ways a warning for Roscoe, but at the same time a message to explain that he's now fully in control of Ben. The demon in Ben, Ben is gone. His soul is lost. And in so doing, there will be no Ben. You're dealing with a creature older than humanity, older than most things. And He even told him about what he saw. He remembers when, our kind was created, if you can believe it. But how much of his memories are true at this point? See, there's always a question. As we get older as kindred, our memories start to become a jumble. We forget things. We misinterpret things. It gets rearranged. I would assume they have the same problem, especially as they are older than we are. But at the end of their discussion, he stepped out of Roscoe's moving vehicle and didn't fall, didn't stumble, didn't seem to do anything but just stop. Which brings in that whole question of, can a demon break the laws of reality? And I think we now have an answer to that. And I think the answer was, yes, they can. Which, to be honest, wouldn't you have expected it? I would have. We're getting into some dark bits, though. You see, Jackie had a messenger that same night. A messenger who called her by her original name, Colette. Wait a minute, people. If Jackie doesn't like me calling her Jackie because we're not friends, would she like me calling her Colette instead? Maybe I'll start referring to her as that. That would probably piss her off. Well, we'll see. We'll stick with Jackie for now, but she was met by a messenger. Jackie had sent a message to her Justicar to get information on the Second Inquisition because of what happened with Lamar. And the information came back too quickly. And by coming back quickly in a few nights, because it turns out, when you think about it, communication from a Justicar's informant to a Justicar is generally private, not intercepted. There are some individuals who have no worries about it and will read stuff addressed to another, especially when one of them is not only the Justicar of Clan Ventru, but are Alistair, the head of the Alistairs that hunt those on the red list. That was there looking for someone attached to this coterie. Justicar Lucinda. I know Lucinda. Her and I have dealings that go way back. I have helped her. She has helped me. She is implacable, determined, stubborn, frustrating, arrogant, but competent. And her messenger was there to pass the information about the Second Inquisition and to remind Jackie of her duty to her clan, her Justicar, and to kindred society. And so Jackie warned Eleanor that night that the Alistair was coming for her sire, and the time was coming very soon to make her choice about whether to betray her sire or to set her sire up. Because Eleanor had already warned her sire that they were looking. But her sire doesn't care. Dolly is the monster I created. An embodiment of nature. They don't believe they are human anymore or kindred. They are the personification of destruction and chaos. A thumb on the scale of history, you might say. And we will talk about them quite shortly here because we're coming to the end of this discussion here. And that is one of the last things I think that need to be met. But as Eleanor was leaving, Eleanor noticed that she was being watched by the same messenger that apparently works for the Justicar. And while this was going on, Sam and Lamar met with Damien, the sheriff. And Damien informs Lamar that he knows that Lamar was involved in this Second Inquisition thing with Kathy, but oddly enough, Kathy has decided to take the heat. Kathy has decided to protect Lamar, which makes you wonder why. At the same time, he also finds out that, Kathy is watching Nero, and that Nero is protected by somebody high enough in the court to tell the sheriff to hands off, to let him exist. Someone who, by existing, is well, danger to the Masquerade, as obviously portrayed, as he destroyed 10 individuals. But he's been told not to mess with him, to leave him alone. It makes you wonder who it is. That is the question. Kathy willing to take the heat. Right now she's being grounded of all things, not allowed to go out except for Elysia. We'll see how that comes too. And you see, this information that Jackie got from Justicar Lucinda was actually really good info about the Second Inquisition, the cell structure set up, how they operate in the city. There's a decided lack of federal backing to it. It seems very few in the federal government understand what's going on, and they run it in a cell structure with a handler running a city. And normally the handler would be the federal guy. So if they can go for the handler, they might be able to cripple the operations in the city for the month. And that was what this information was. And they were going over a way to deal with this agent. You see, it was suggested by some members of the coterie, and I won't say who. They know who they were, that perhaps they could use this handler to their advantage. But that's what started this damn Second Inquisition in the first place. Only a fool attempts to use your enemy like that. You don't know what they know about our kind. You don't know what power they have. You don't know if they can tell if you've even ghouled one. If you have a rabid dog and you put it on a leash, sure, the dog may bite other people, but you still have a dog on a leash that's rabid and will bite you too. You should not fuck around with that. It's the same night that Lamar got what he thought was a text from Tariq saying he was out front and they needed to talk. And when Lamar goes outside, there was a vehicle waiting for him with a biker that he recognized. One of Tally's men. And they took him out to a motel on the edge of town, one that Lamar knew that Tally had been staying at. And when we went in there, Lamar got told a story about duty and obligation. And sometimes you owe favors to people and you have to do things that you don't enjoy because you have an obligation that you must repay. And sometimes your duty is distasteful, but you must do that as well. And Lamar caught on quickly that he was referring to what was about to happen, because out of the room stepped Lily. Lillian Sanger is what she goes by, but I knew her as Lily. I knew her, well, I spoke about her quite a bit back when I was in D.C., when I was keeping an eye on what went on there. She was an interesting one. I didn't expect her to become the monster she's become. But then again, tools that get cast aside sometimes get picked up by others. And a tool becomes a weapon based on who wields it. And in the case of the one who picked up that tool, he did forge her into a weapon. Because what she did to Lamar that night, well, I think the best way to describe it is she went through his brain like a Rolodex to find the info she needed about Nolan Wilhelm, Archon of the Camarilla, sire to Jackie, one of the ones who participated in the attack on Marcus Vitel, who destroyed Marcus Vitel, who, the one who's returned, claims to be Marcus Vitel, still keeps up appearances and still holds grudges. And as a favor that Tally owed to the individual claiming to be Vitel, Lamar was sacrificed in some ways so that they could get the info they needed to go and destroy Nolan Wilhelm. And I think in some ways it broke Lamar that night. He was left with no phone for Tally to retreat to the city so that he could destroy him before Lamar got back to town. When Lamar gets back to town and tells the coterie about the events of that night, unfortunately, the vision became all too clear. And the vision that Eleanor had about the white horse falling and the gems in the fangs of the hound, the hellhound, the giant wolf thing, were red as a blood red or as a rose. And on the ride to go and check on what happened in the hotel that Nolan was staying, Eleanor tried to get a vision but could only pull up an image of a black rose. A black rose, a rose that had fallen from the garden in this case, one that had been corrupted by the nature of oblivion. See, Lily was in town to see Nolan destroyed by her with her own eyes, and Tally was tasked to do it. What went on in that hotel room? I will say, Nolan fought well. He hurt Tally more than I've seen in a long time. But the contest wasn't in question. Nolan fell that night. Jackie's sire was destroyed. And Tally got his pound of flesh that he was sent to get. Vitel got his revenge. And the coterie was left with blood and ashes. Jackie was left with a memory of a man that had fallen. That time takes its toll on us all. You may think, well, if you have eternity, trauma doesn't matter, but trauma piles on trauma. Pain piles on pain. Loss piles on loss. And in his case, the weight of it all had broken him in some ways. He was not the kindred he once was. He should have fled when that told, but he did not. He stayed out of some loyalty to protect Jackie. And in some ways, I guess it makes sense. Had he fled the city, Tally and Lily would have had to gone after Jackie to find out possibly where he went. So by staying, I guess you could say he protected the two of them. He protected Jackie and the whole coterie. But it doesn't matter, I don't think, in the end, because he was destroyed. And then Lucinda shows up and verifies what happened. Takes command of the scene. Explains that what happened in the city may not get out because, you see, if an Archon is killed in the heart of, well, the jewel of the Camarilla by Tally, and it gets out in public knowledge, the tower looks weak. At a time it can't appear to be weak. But it's also where Lucinda sees Eleanor. And as I said before, that Lucinda is ruthless, dedicated, stubborn. The coldness at the loss of an Archon doesn't really affect Lucinda anymore. She just blew it off. But she did ask about the redless target dolly. And this is where my part in the story comes in. You see, as a favor to Jackie, Lucinda is not going to use the brutal methods to trap Dolly. It calls for a subtler touch. And in this case, Lucinda has asked me to be the one to put down my my mantle of neutrality, to get involved in the city's problems, and to help deal with the problem I created. Because I did create Dolly when I was very young as a kindred. I don't talk much about it. It's back during the plague, what you call the Black Death. I was a monk then. Used to go town to town, passing news, preaching, trying to convert, try to get people to join us. But after Embrace, I was angry. And then I realized I could observe the history of things. I could see how eternity would play out. And as somebody who passed news from time to time, I could have eternity to pass the news. I thought it was a great idea. But I quickly learned that the kindred society is somewhat impulsive, dangerous. Left to our own designs, we might one day either destroy ourselves or destroy the kind that we feed upon. So my idea was to have a child, one who could act as the helping hand to push, either to remove troublesome individuals that I feel upset the balance, or to shake things up if things need shaken. And so I found an individual. Of all things, he was a manservant that worked for a group at one point. Matter of fact, I mentioned one of them he worked for, Sir Warren. Interesting knight from the Black Ages, one leg. Long story on that one, but they had fired him. And I found him. And I embraced him. And then I started creating a weapon. Changed what was in their head. Did things I shouldn't. You might say I tore them down and rebuilt them into a monster. The perfect killer of kindred. No remorse. No hesitation. The ability to be unseen, to pass through everything, to blend in into any crowd. Because our kind, though we can change what we look like, there's always a telltale too generic, too bland. There's always something that gives us away. But not what I did to Dolly. And in the process, Dolly was no longer he or she. They were they. Because, well, they were everyone, no one, and everything. And unfortunately, the problem with breaking somebody and building them back up is you don't always get what you thought. I created a perfect killer, a perfect one to push things. But it was uncontrollable. They could not be contained. They could not be constrained. They wouldn't hold themselves to keeping balance, to nudge things slightly. Oh no. They saw themselves as a god, chaos incarnate, the wind, a tornado rolling through, a hurricane on the coast, floods. And so now I bear the guilt. I created the monster. And though Eleanor is a daughter of Malkav, what was done to her was because of me. What was done to Sun was because of me. What has been done to more kindred than I think even Lucinda knows was because of me. So in this one case, my neutrality must end. And I'm glad you're not going to remember any of this. I'm going to wipe all of this when we're done tonight because you can't remember this. But I'm going to get involved. But I've talked quite a while. Sure, you may have a few questions for me. If you do, please ask. Because as I'm going to wipe you anyway, you might as well ask me if you have any questions. Sometimes it makes me feel better to talk about things. Sometimes. You wonder why I always make comments about Jackie. You see Jackie as one of the Blue Bloods. And while they serve a purpose, they really do, oddly enough. A lot of people don't understand and they feel there's no purpose in nobility. They have a purpose. But at the same time, there's an arrogance or a Even when they're not arrogance, there's a egotism that needs to be taken down, you see, because they look down, most of them look down on my kind. And I can guarantee if Jackie knew half of what I was, she would either look down on me or try to destroy me. Or both. Look down while she destroyed me. So. Oh, so you've heard rumors about somebody new joining us. Interesting. Yes, there is somebody new coming, you see, because with Destiny leaving the city. I don't know why there seems to be a cycle of people, but one leaves, one comes back. One's added. There's a new one. Well, let's just call her Jenny. Jenny, you see, is, well, she's one of those uncivilized, but civilized in this case, gangrel. And you wonder what a gangrel is. They're the ones who traditionally, if you look into legends, have turned to wolf and grow claws. That's where they come from, but that's neither here nor there. Most of them live in the wilderness, but you do see some who are a lot more refined, a lot more respectful. But in this one's case, she's managed to catch the eye of somebody rather important. Somebody rather not just important, but connected to Chicago. And let's just say that there's some vested interest in what she does in Chicago. You wonder if I could do it all over again, what would I change? I would have destroyed Dolly. Well, I wouldn't have embraced Dolly. I would have picked a better child. I would have not created the monster I did, or I would have at least found somebody who had a little bit more compassion, or possibly even a conscience. Then again, this individual had a conscience and I took it from him. I might have left the conscience in. The problem was, well, I don't have personality or personalities. I have templates I wear, is the best way to call it. You see, we all manifest our curse differently. In my case, I am a non-person in some ways that only becomes a person when I take on certain roles. For those that remember my first broadcast, I was in D.C. as a homeless man. And that was the mask I took. That was the template I wore. And I was that homeless man. Doing a radio broadcast on Pirate and in Pirate TV broadcast. And then you saw me in, well, when I was talking about the events in Richmond. And I was a spirit medium. And that was the template I wore. And I was that person. You see, it's not multiple personalities because that involves switching. I don't switch personalities. I switch people. But I only do it when it's time for one to end and the next one to begin. You see, I was the homeless man on the street here, telling about what was going on. But it was time for a change because that personality had worn itself out. So I made a new one, geared a new one. It allows me to speak to you, talk to you all, to be part of you. You wish for me to find an accident to hit Roscoe. You see, I'm afraid I would avoid doing that because that would be me breaking my neutrality. And yes, I know what I'm about to do with Eleanor and Dolly. You could say is breaking the neutrality, but I look at it as restoring the balance that I upset. Yes, I know. It's a fine point. But then again, our kind do that all the time. So that's just the way it happens. Do I feel you wonder if I feel a sense of obligation to Eleanor, my grandchild, and will I protect her? There comes a point when a kindred must stand on their own. Stand or fall. Can't protect them forever. And I do feel a sense of obligation because of things that were done to her were done because of what I did. But she is her own person. She has been kindred long enough. I do not have the gift of future like she does. My gift lies in the web itself. But I catch glimpses of things through her that not even she realizes. And I think how can I describe it? I think she has something to do in Chinatown before too long. And though I wish it wouldn't happen, I have a feeling that I can't stop it and that it has to. So, if you ask if I will protect her, if she does what I suspect in Chinatown, I cannot. Because I cannot go there. You wonder about my neutrality. Stopping what could grow for Eleanor. You see, here's the problem. And it is a big problem. What Dolly wants to do to Eleanor is to create another monster like them. And they will destroy. You see, what Eleanor doesn't realize is she wasn't the first. Eleanor was the third. And there is one other still that if Eleanor knew about, it would probably destroy her or break her even worse. So you see, it's not about growth for Eleanor. It's about preventing another like Dolly. Preventing my mistake from repeating. Because Dolly learned what I did. Dolly knows what I know. Dolly could redo what I did. So, Eleanor must be what she should be, not what Dolly tries to make her. Eleanor should not be a weapon of Dolly's type. Eleanor is a seer. Eleanor is one who should help guide those around her using her visions. Not use her visions to further, well, chaos and destruction and what Dolly does. So Dolly must pay. It's not about protecting Eleanor. It's actually just about fixing where I went wrong. We make mistakes. All of us do. And some of us have an obligation to fix it. I guess we talked about it earlier. Duty and obligation. I have an obligation. So where are we going from here? Well, I have a feeling you're going to meet this new individual. This Jenny. Very soon. Perhaps next week. Perhaps the week after. We'll see. But you'll see him, well, the next time we speak. We will talk. And I'm sure you will find out about them that night. But it's been an interesting talk. But I think we've talked long enough tonight. Talking about my child, Dolly. It's a danger of tearing my mask down, breaking this template. And I am not ready to be someone new. I am not ready to do something different. I have to at least do one more thing. Because some of my other versions that I've been in the past, I don't think would work well for what must be done. So, we will drink, and we will spend the night together, and talk of nothing. And thus ends the summary of Season 3 of Windy City After Dark. Of course, join us on our Discord. Please, if you're not on our Discord, you should be. We have an amazing community of great people, and I love our community, and I love the people that's around it. It has been an amazing group of people to have met, and without our Discord, we wouldn't have had Windy City, because that's where we recruit our people from. We cast from them. So, of course, if you want to catch back episodes, these summaries are going to be on YouTube. But the point of the summaries is you can catch up quickly. If you want to get all the little details, you can watch the summaries and then go back and watch the episodes off of YouTube. That way you can actually catch all the details, but use the summary so that you can jump current and live and not feel you've kind of missed anything, okay? Want to say, get your season 3 merch, your season 4 merch. We got that stuff is appearing now in our merch store. We got some badass Windy City After Dark posters, like movie style posters done by the amazing Combustion Girl. They're cool as shit. We've got our new mug that has the new character, Jenny. Her face is on it. And we are looking forward to having Ivy Raven join us as the newest player to the group. Really looking forward to that. That's going to be some great stuff. Can't wait for it to happen. If you want to check out other great content, check out our friends list. We've got other people that we, check them out. One of them has been talking here in chat a bit, Junie Vadech. She's on the RPG table. And go check out the RPG table. She does Vampire on Sundays with her crew. And it's some great stuff. She's a different style storyteller than I am, which makes it great because there's, different styles is what makes the hobby great. It's what makes it amazing to watch is you can see different people do it their way and their own take. And you can see just such amazing stories that way. Schedule. This week, we got Werewolf on Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern. They survived somehow episode 8. Not sure how. Trust me, it was touch and go. I think they survived because of Ravnos Archon showing up as Ghost Eyes of the Creek. Because had he not been there, I think they would have been murderized. Yep. And check out Ravnos Archon on his Twitch stream. He played in our Werewolf Died. He is coming back next month with a mage. He's going to be streaming mage again. We're going to have another season of his mage game with a different cast this time with some amazing players. One of which some of you know is Mama McStabber. She's actually going to play Wraith or a mage, which is shocking to me. But she, after seeing Ravnos Archon run, it's like, yeah, I'm down. I'm in on this shit. So he hasn't made his full cast announcement yet. So I'm not going to spoil anyone else who's joining him. But I will snitch on my wife. She's joining him in the cast. So get ready for that shit. We do not have a Saturday stream next week. Tis is off right now. But next Sunday, join us at 5 p.m. Eastern. Episode 1 of Season 4. Of Windy City After Dark. We are back, and we are ready to start kicking this off. I do have another announcement to make for everybody. We will be doing next month. We are doing getting involved in the Game Pink. Help say it's game over for breast cancer. We're going to be part of the Game Pink initiative next month for the month of October. We're going to be doing a fundraiser for the whole month for the National Breast Cancer Foundation, and we've got one hell of a busy schedule lined up right now. We did it last year for Bluebeard's Bride, and we raised $500 in a single stream. I'm not expecting that in a single stream, but we have a whole month we're going to be doing it, and we've got some amazing content lined up. We've got stuff like, Thirsty Sword Lesbians is coming up. We've got a mage game coming up. I mean, trust me when I say October's looking crazy, and we've got some serious stuff lined up. So be ready for, let's just say a busy week every week in October as we raise funds. So, it's an important charity to us because it actually helps. They're one of the ones that do a lot of good for those with breast cancer. So I hope to see some of you there for it so that you can, participate. And even if you can't donate, be part of the chat, be here with us. We love our community. And, I'm going to close this out, everyone, by bringing up mental health. As you can see, I wear a Malkavian signet ring if it'll focus, but mental health, it's no joke. It's not a laughing matter. It's quite serious. Please take mental health seriously. Check in on friends, check in on loved ones, check in on family, check in on those around you, and please make sure they're okay because a lot of people right now aren't. And some people just need a friendly voice to talk to them or even a friendly chat message to be that hand to help them off the edge and to reach out to them to help them get through a day or a week or a month or whatever they need to do. And if you do suffer from mental health issues like many of us do, myself included, reach out to those around you, please. And if you can't reach out to those around you and you can't afford mental health or mental health professionals because, well, this is America and apparently we don't give a shit about healthcare. Right now in chat, there is a list of numbers you can call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And you can speak to somebody on the other end of the line, or you can text 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and talk to somebody through text to help you through what you're going through. Because we all need help sometimes, and there's nothing wrong with needing help because we're human, makes us who we are. And if you don't live in the U.S., because I know we have a number of viewers that are from other countries, please, in chat, we have a website you can go to right now that you can pull up the mental health help counseling lines and all the lines in your country so that you can find out who you can contact. Because we're in this together, everybody, and we care about people around us, and we want to see everybody making it through it. And speaking of caring and making it through it, please get your damn COVID shots, please. I know some people, it's experimental. It's not that experimental. We've been doing mRNA shit for a long time. It's actually one that they used based off of an earlier vaccine that they were using for SARS and stuff. So it's not as experimental as you think. And trust me, any side effects you think you may get from it are not as bad as the side effects of COVID. Because COVID itself, if you go with unvaccinated and you get COVID, long COVID is a bad thing. There's people who still haven't gotten their sense of taste back, their sense of smell back, COVID toes, dead, lungs permanently damaged. Please get your shot. Get both of them. Get it taken care of. If FDA has approved Pfizer, that is correct, as somebody points out in chat. But trust me, please get your shots. We're coming up on winter when we're going to hit a resurgence. And if you don't get your shots, we're going to be back in lockdowns, or the medical community is going to just fucking riot and quit because the nurses and doctors are getting tired of seeing unvaccinated people filling up the hospital, causing people who got vaccinated but have different illnesses, non-COVID related illnesses, not able to get a bed because it's full of COVID patients that refuse to get vaccinated. So please, if you can, get vaccinated. And I thank you all for coming for this. I thank you all for following along with our story, and I look forward to season 3 or season 4. I do want to say there's some shit coming. I don't generally plan a whole lot, but we have broad story ideas for where things may go this season, and there's some shit coming that the viewers are going to be like, God damn. And it is what it is, people. Actions have consequences, and shit happens. So as your boy Twitch, I thank you, everybody, and good night.